Then we can move on to the second part, which is an interactive session of our workshop. And there will be looking together at a series of case studies and mapping out where Dharmamitra can support researchers in these processes and the questions that come up along the way. And I would like to explain how this discussion part will unfold a little bit. First, we will kindly ask the participants who submitted the materials earlier to briefly walk us through their problem statement one by one. These materials were already sent out to registered participants in advance, so everyone can follow along at their own pace on their own device. And we also project them on the screen during the presentation, so you can watch them with us as well. And after each walkthrough, I will hand over to Sebastian, who will give a live demonstration of how Dharmamitra can help with these specific problems. And after that, we warmly encourage everyone to ask questions, share observations, comments, or suggestions. And we hope this will spark a lively collaborative discussion around the material and problems brought to the table. And if you have questions or comment, please use the raised hand button and wait to be called on by name, as until now we did. Before we begin, let me quickly go over the order in which contributors will present their materials. They also numbered in the same order in the shared folder, so you can find more easily. So the first will be Catherine Querl, and then Dylan Essler and Yadi Ku, then John Newman, and finally Philip Maas. So first, I would like to ask Catherine Querl to briefly walk us through her case. Catherine, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
great. Welcome. Please share with us your material.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I used Dharmamitra to translate a passage from Tibetan, and I also tried to do some initial research on that passage using Dharmamitra. The passage itself is quite straightforward, I would say, in Tibetan. It's also just one short passage, and it's the opening section of a commentary on the first Vajra statement of the single intention, the Gongchik. And in the file here, you can see the Tibetan source text that I entered, and also you see Dharmamitra's translation output. And within the translation output, there's some gray highlights that indicates, or they indicate my own corrections and notes. So these were places where I think that the translation still needs improvement. And then there are also two yellow highlights, and they mark the names of two Buddhas that appear in the text. And one is associated with an exceptionally long lifespan, and the other one with an unusual short one. So this, when I saw this pairing, then I thought that it might be based on a canonical source. So I tried to use Dharmamitra's research function to explore the names of these two Buddhas. And I must say, when I did that, I wasn't aware of the difference between the research and the explore functions, and I'm still not totally sure what the difference is. So I think I used the research function, but I'm not 100% sure. And then, as you can see from my notes, that's where I ran into some difficulties. So one issue was the Sanskrit names of the two Buddhas. They were inconsistent between the translation and the research function. And then in the end, I moved away from Dharmamitra and used 84,000 glossary search to identify the Buddhas and find a plausible Sanskrit form. Then I went back to Dharmamitra and tried to verify these two, or especially one of the names. And then I had difficulties finding the links to the scholarly editions or scanned source texts regarding the name of this Buddha. So yeah, so basically I went back and used more conventional research tools such as 84,000 glossary or ArcITS and scans of printed editions of the Sanskrit text. Yeah, so that's what I did, and I was yeah, overall I think I was quite impressed by the quality of the translation. I would estimate that around 70 or maybe 80% of the passage was translated accurately, and yeah, but in the case of the research function, I didn't find it especially helpful in this case. Yeah, so that's maybe the summary of my little passage here. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Katrin. I think first of all, the machine translation is usually weakest around names, and this has, for some reason, always been the case already, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we started to work on this, that while the grammatical structure and the overall functioning of the verbs and so on, this was something the models learned very quickly. The names remain problematic for a long time, and I think if we look at the data that we have in order to train the system, it also makes somewhat sense because names are always, I think, the items that have the most room for variation. Yeah, somebody prefers to maybe keep the names in Tibetan, for example, in a certain case. Others might go directly for the Sanskrit and use that directly, and some might try to render it properly into English. That can also be done. Yeah, so you have at least three different ways, and maybe 4 or 5. Then some people like to use diacritics properly. Other people say, okay, it's enough to not use the diacritics, but then to still kind of Sanskritize the terms. And we really have everything in our data, and it's very, very difficult to come to one solution that fits all of this. And this is exactly why the translation of names also in Dharmamitra is something that is a bit flickery and unstable. Yeah, so that certainly happens. Yeah, then I think when it comes to the research function, I mean, we can try. Let me see if I can switch to the Dharmamitra window. Yeah, so I think with your passage, so now we have this specific term. We can go to explore, for example, enter this term, and yeah, this will then find a couple of references, hopefully, that can be helpful. So yeah, so that is one way to approach this. I think it can be tricky with, for example, extended Wiley. This is one of those things. I think I'm not sure. Is the large set in your document, is that intended, or is that a part of extended Wiley? I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
That's neither. It wasn't intended and
Okay.
not part of extended Wiley. I don't know how that
Yeah.
happened.
Okay. So because that really makes a difference in the quality of the results, and especially for yeah, for Tibetan Wiley, this is very, very tricky because yeah, the Wiley is, I think, a very interesting way of transliterating text because it's very different from how the original script in Tibetan works. So the way the surface form is. So this is why uppercasing really makes a difference. But if we input it in lowercase like this, then yeah, you find the passage of the Samadhi Rajya Sutra, which is maybe the one that gave you the hint about the Chandra Anana. So that surface is here. Yeah, so in this case, Explore, I think, is a good place to start because it will look through the Tibetan works that have recorded Sanskrit passages and then gives you that overview. So here you get that. Yeah, I think now coming to the metadata, and you raised that question about the edition and yeah, how to get the sources. And I think this might also link to something that Philip Maas asked previously about. So when we have a result like this, for example, we have a piece of Sanskrit text that might be relevant to the search query that we have. We can click on the View Segment button, and this then enables to unfold the metadata here, which gives most of what we could gather. So our e-text in this case is based on the Gretel edition. So this is where we have sourced this form. We have the link to the original Gretel version, and then we also have the Tibetan translation, the Chinese translation recorded. So this is a starting point. We also have the edition information if that was given in the Gretel e-text. Now, I think you mentioned in your question that in a lot of cases we do require much more secondary literature and information than what is available here. Yeah, and I also completely agree about that. The problem here is that we don't really have the capacities to input all of that data into our system in a reliable way. So right now we can say, okay, this e-text is based on this edition. That far we can go, but if there is another edition or multiple editions of the same Sanskrit text, we don't have a comprehensive catalog of that. And that also extends to the secondary literature where we cannot really at the moment not really give an overview of who else has published on this text and so on. So that is currently a limitation of the system. Yeah.
And is there a link to the scans of Vaidya's edition, or?
So we have links to the scans of those editions that are available on archive. So if there is a PDF version of that on archive.org, then we provide the link on Dharmamitra. So I think we don't have it recorded in the database for this Vaidya edition. It might be on archive. So there's a possibility that we haven't added it yet. We have done about 600 Sanskrit texts so far, I think, where we have the links to the archive version, but for this one we don't have it. And of course, the problem here is very obvious that a lot of the editions are, of course, under copyright, so we cannot just freely upload the PDFs. And archive is a stopgap solution because, yeah, some of the texts are available on archive. So if that is the case, then we can at least provide a link to archive where you can access the original. But I think, unfortunately, for 70% of the Sanskrit material, the archive link is not available at the moment. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's for the explore function. I think the rendering with Chandramukha, so if I go to the translation part, we might see that happening. I think that is just not the greatest translation. Yeah, so if we go here, I think Chandra, yeah, we have Amitayus here, and then we have Chandramukha, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think that is happening here. Yeah. I think there's also one thing to be aware of, that Dharmamitra in general has a certain sweet spot on the length of the passage that you input. So if it's too short, then it will lack the necessary context to come to a good rendering. But if it's also too long, then at some point it will start to also lose a bit of the quality. So that's another problem. Yeah. But yeah, especially consistency on the proper names in multiple paragraphs, that can be a limitation. Yeah.
And could you say a little bit more on the difference between the research and the explore function? So
Yes.
what would you recommend? When should we use the explore function and when the research function? Because I think what I did was I just took the part where the Buddha's name is mentioned, but the full sentence, or at least some part of it, and then I used that in the search in the explore function, or also the research function, and then the passage from the Samadhi Raja didn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So the main difference between research and explore is that research will kind of happen in the same window. So you stay in your translation window. You're not being teleported into another function. So this is, I think, very convenient that you stay in your translation workflow, and then yeah, the results are shown along with the translation work that you are doing. So it doesn't require you to switch into a different mode. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage of the research mode is that it doesn't give you the capability to apply any filters. So in this case, if you want to look specifically for Sanskrit renderings, for example, you can do that in the Explore option. But here in the research mode, you don't have the filter settings. It's really just for translation, basically. And in a way, I think if you just want to have a quick overview of the intertextuality and of possible references, then research is a great place to start, but it's not the best way to do yeah, more targeted queries. So for that, I would recommend to use Explore. So yeah, research is a bit more closer to a translation workflow, I would say, and Explore is more for search workflows. But on the technological level, they are very similar. The biggest difference is that the Explore version provides you the filter options, and it also will like make some more targeted narrowing down of the results. Yeah. While deep research is more general and tries to go across all languages and provide something that could be relevant. Yeah.
Also, one thing is that I couldn't find the filter options in my
Okay.
Explore. Is that maybe is there a difference in like which browser I use, or
It should be available, so you can click on the settings. And the one thing is that in order to get the filter here, you need to first select the language that you want to filter for. So that
oh,
is,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yes, because obviously we can only show the source once the language has been decided, because otherwise we would have to render all the options into the source menu. That would be too much. But if you set to Tibetan, then you get the option to choose specific collections. So you can then set it to yeah, Kangyo and Tengyo and so on. So that becomes possible after that. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of necessary. But if you don't do it, then this will not be selectable. Yeah.
May I jump in for one quick
Yeah,
thought
sure.
about the importance of the right settings? If you go back to the translate
Mhm.
program, if
Mhm.
you set the settings for Wiley and not leave it on auto detect mode, then
Mhm.
it will find Chandranana and not render it as Chandramukha. So these small nuance things in the settings can really help
Mm.
to get better result.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Um, yeah, exactly. I think now as you say this, we get Chandra Anana. Yeah, something new that I didn't
Okay.
know as well.
Also, I already see that some other issues were solved now.
Mm, mm.
That's interesting. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about a reason why it is better in Wiley, but yeah, I think maybe our the system to select the encoding automatically might not always make the best choices. So yeah, so that's also good observation, Sada. Thank you for that. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think then you asked in your document about the citation part. So as we are now looking at this together, we have the citation link here. So by clicking on that, um, something should happen. Maybe it's let me refresh the window. Um, yeah, this is a bit odd, but let me generate a new translation. Yeah, it might be that the passage is very long. That could have an influence, of course. Let me check if it maybe works on a shorter passage here. Hmm. Oh yeah, it was there for a moment. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here you go. Of course, in the case of a long passage like this, you obviously also get a long citation, but I think it should be totally fine to shorten this because the whole passage will be in the link. So you can, of course, edit the citation a little bit, but this link will remain accessible. So by clicking on that link, um, here, and I think it should also be here. Yeah, it can be opened. And I don't know if you now see the link. Is it visible? Okay, yeah. So then, yeah, the input that you gave to the system as well as the response will be preserved on that link. And then also the different citation options are down here. So that's one way to cite it, of course. I mean, I don't know what the current guidelines are about AI usage for academic work. Um, I think it's probably used a lot, and people mostly don't cite the usage of that. And it's also, of course, it's obviously not mandatory to cite the Dharmamitra. We just want to provide the option for those of you who want to do that. It would be nice, I think. It would contribute a bit to the transparency about the use of these tools. But yeah, I think obviously a lot of people are relying on these tools without always mentioning that. Yeah. Yeah. I think when it comes to, because you also made the point about um, the linking to RKTS maybe and to other pages. So for that, I can maybe briefly just demonstrate that we have this in Explore. And yeah, if you have results like this, for example, is a Tango result. So here we have the links both to our database here, Tokyo University, the TODA database, and to RKTS as well. So this will give you the yeah, the folio level. So you get the actual page of the result. So that hopefully helps to yeah work with the original source. Yeah. Yeah, but then I think the combination of this tool with 84,000 glossary, for example, is really a good idea. And probably we need to look for the best of both worlds when we do our work. Yeah, so Dharmamitra can give some ideas and might also give some insights that might not be easily accessible, but then at the same time without reference, without looking up reliable reference tools like the 84,000 glossary and others, it will be um, difficult to only trust what the system is producing. Yeah. Yeah, do we have
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
I think most of the other questions you actually already answered in your presentation today.
Yeah.
So I also would hope for more links to source text, as in the case of the Samadhi Raja Sutra, to actually be able to check the scanned, let's say, Vaidya's edition of the sutra. That would, of course, be nice. And also other things you mentioned today, like that one could upload one's own glossary would be very nice, very helpful. And also reference to existing translations, also with scans, if possible. I think these were the case, like all the things that you already mentioned in your presentation. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, I think the limitations for that are, of course, on the one hand, we cannot automatize the creation of these databases completely. So when it comes to secondary literature, who has written what on which topic, that still requires a lot of manual checking. And in that sense, yeah, we are a very small team, so we don't really have the resources to do that, even though I would hope that we can improve in the future. And yeah, I think for other translations and other reference material, there's also the small problem of copyright, which I think can be worked with on if there's the way to make agreements with people who have done the translations and the publishers of the translations. Yeah, but I'm happy that we can provide some of those references on the website, so that's already a start. Yeah, but thank you very much. Yeah.
So does anyone have questions or comments on this point? Please feel free to ask questions and raise your hand. Even if it is not technical, just regarding this interesting passage of text or any comments.
I have a
Yeah.
small question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. There's Tibetan Sanskrit Dictionary by Negi, published in Central University of Higher Tibetan Studies in Sarnath, Varanasi, India. And it gives, for Davesha, it gives Chandramukha. And it cites Shiksha Samuchaya, if I'm not mistaken, because the source is abbreviated. But I do think that Shasta means Shiksha Samuchaya. So I have this question. So you didn't include this dictionary, Tibetan Sanskrit dictionary by Negiji into your database?
No, we don't have Negi in our translation pipeline. So actually, we don't use dictionaries for our translation system directly because our experience in the past is that dictionaries usually bring more problems than they solve because there's, and I think Negi is in a way a good example. It's an amazing achievement. It is a fantastic work. But then one term, I think, can have so many possible definitions, and unless you really know in the context what you need to work with, it just creates a lot of confusion. And this is exactly what happens with the AI models. Then if we provide too much contextual information, it really degrades the quality. And for that reason, we are not including Negi, but it's interesting that it has actually Chandamukha. So maybe there's some like, yeah, I think we certainly have trained on the Siksha Samuchaya because we have aligned the Tibetan and the Sanskrit rendering. So I'm sure the model has seen this rendering, and I wouldn't be surprised if it has picked up that at some point. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. This is a good observation. It's interesting to see that. Yeah.
Okay, we have two more questions. Please, Philippe Maas, go ahead.
Yes, hello, and yeah, thank you for this wonderful workshop. Nice to see you all. Yeah, the first remark that I wanted to make goes into the same direction like the previous one, namely the inclusion of dictionaries. Maybe it would be great, for example, to have Edgerton's Buddhist Hybrid Sanskrit dictionary, who has a reference to Chandrananda with a concrete reference to where this is found. That would be maybe useful. And for the explorer function of Dharmamitra, I think that SARS 3, South Asian Research Documentation Service, that was created by the University of Halle a couple of years ago, which has a keyword search for articles, might actually be a wonderful research to include for you.
This is a great idea. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. I think I will look into that, how to integrate that. And yeah, about the dictionary, in this case, we'll probably, because we have already integrated Edgerton, but only for the Sanskrit headwords in the grammatical function. So it only works in that sense. And it also is a bit problematic in quotation marks because our grammatical engine is based on the DCS by Oliver, and that is obviously a classical Sanskrit resource. So it is great on Vedic and on classical Sanskrit, but it really doesn't map Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit well, which is also not the intention of the project. And it also doesn't map Prakrit or like any other like Pali, and not to speak of Pali. I think this is really where the coverage goes down. And obviously Edgerton's entries only go so far. Yeah, and in that sense, there's certainly work to be done to create a good grammatical parser for Buddhist hybrid material, and then also, yeah, I think the reverse lookup to be able to include the obvious results for the Tibetan to Sanskrit would be great. I think here it would be really helpful. So that's also a good thing to add. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next, Mital Trivedi, please. We are listening you.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the dictionary thing. Would it be possible to not include a translation of the dictionary, but just a reference to the entries in the dictionary to not to avoid complications with the translation that it puts out, and also at the same time to give options for looking for meanings in like entries in dictionaries, minimize the legwork that someone would have to do, still be able to use the tool productively.
I understand, because on the one hand there are already dictionary websites out there, so of course the Cologne Sanskrit Dictionary Project, they've done fantastic work, and we have also integrated the outcome of that in our system. But I can understand that you don't want to have 4 tabs open and then always switch between them. And I think this is really the problem that we have here. And I must admit that I have had the same experience working with the Cologne dictionaries in the past. It's not their fault. I think it's really just the problem of different resources that need to be orchestrated. Yeah, so good point. I think it would be really nice to integrate them just to make that one click less. Yeah, so you have it in the same place. So yeah, let us see what we can do. I think it's a nice idea. Yeah, and in a way, we already have it a bit in the grammar function, but that is limited because you cannot start your own queries. Yeah, you don't have the option yet. So we should do that. So yeah, good idea.
Okay, then Ujjwal Kumar, please go ahead.
Hi, Sebastian. Good evening from India.
Yes.
Actually, I am working with the Pali text and sometimes also using the Hindi translation in your site, and the translation is almost good, correct? But I have the issue with the grammatical analysis of the tools. I don't find out the compound. I think your tool is not analysis the compound, gender, and the vibhaktis are it shows, but not the compound. I think it would be better if we also enhance the capacity of the app and add this compound, Pali compound. And what is the the criteria of adding more text, and especially the Hindi translation, I mean the Indian language translation? Is there any future scope to add some more Indian languages? Like for example, there is other one Southeast Asian language. Thai is not there. So do you have any plan to add Thai or some important language like in India, like Bengalis, etc.?
Yes, very good questions. And to go one after the other. So I think I understood you correctly. You're mostly working on Pali, yeah? So that is what you're looking at. Yes. Okay, so for the compound analysis, this exactly strikes at the problem that we have, because our tree bank, our grammatical annotations are only available for classical, and we haven't really done any work on annotating Pali. And it would be great to do a project on this, and I would be very happy to collaborate if there's a team that wants to work on this. I don't think we have to annotate, let's say, 100,000 sentences. It will probably be enough to do maybe 1,000 or 2,000, but that could help to like bootstrap a system that can handle Pali properly. And it would be really great to fill this gap. I think right now it's exactly as you describe on compounds, it just falls apart and it can't render them. So that is yeah, would be great to do that. When it comes to the literature, to the Indian languages, yes, we unfortunately don't have much Hindi data in our system, and I would also, I myself don't read Hindi. This is a bit sad, but yeah, I think it would be great to work together with a team that wants to add Hindi. I think it would be great. I think there's a lot of data
If
out
I
there that
want
we
to,
could add to
if
the
I want
system.
to support or to join you, what is the process? How I can add the Hindi or the Indian languages in the system?
I think the easiest way would be really to just digitize Hindi translations, or to even just provide us with PDF files of Hindi translations, and we can take it from there, or just like a PDF file of a specific Sanskrit text, of Pali text, and so on. And ideally, if they're already OCR'd, if they're already in a machine readable format, that is even better, but we can even do that. So I think we can absolutely discuss a collaboration on that. Yeah.
The next question, which I would like to ask you, is that even the Hindi translation is not very good. The standard translation we don't have still even the Pali Tripitaka. We don't have the translation of commentaries and some commentaries, etc. Very few texts you will get in a good Hindi translation. So in that case, how you proceed?
I think this is a general problem that we also have for Pali into English, I think, even though it might be less severe, because obviously the sutras have been translated multiple times, but then the commentaries, there's only selected pieces that have been done, and so the coverage is very uneven. Yeah, I think we can make use of English as a bridge when we want to go to Hindi and other languages, so English can help to fill the gap. But yeah, we might just hit real limitations at some point, I think. So yeah, commentaries is challenging, yeah. Yeah, and I think also the same goes for Thai. I think you mentioned Thai as a target
Yeah,
language.
there is no Thai. I think there is no Thai translation in your app.
Yeah,
Recently,
unfortunately.
I was in Thailand, and some senior monks. I just introduced you an app to some senior monks there, and they were very surprised and happy to see. But again, they cry that there is no Thai. What's
Yeah.
wrong with this app? Why Thai is not working? I don't know. There is no Thai at all. So
I
I
think
think
it would be great. I think it would be really great to add Thai to Dharmamitra, and I'm sure there's a Thai rendering of the Pali Canon, and it would require some data collection to have
you might be
this
know
data
that the Thai government even now providing, they are running some translation project, but from Thai Siam Ratha edition to English. So might be you can collaborate with some big, temple or some funding agency in Thailand.
Yeah. No, it would be great. I think there's no reason not to have Thai on Dharmamitra, to put it that way. So whatever can be done, yeah. And I think similar for Vietnamese, for example, would also be very helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any more questions for this presentation or this topic? Okay, if not, then let's move on maybe to the next presenter. Okay. Dylan Essler, are you with us?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead and present your case.
So the text here is the Guyendu Tilaka, or also it's known as the Chandaguya Tilaka, which is a back translation of the title from the Tibetan. And this is classified as one of the Niruttara Yoga Tantras. And so it's found in the Tibetan canon. The Toku number is there, 477. And it's also found in the versions of the Nyingma Gyubum, say the alternative canon for the Nyingma school. And this passage is drawn from chapter 6, and so it's a chapter which explains how the various Brahmanical deities are terrified by the wrathful manifestation of the Buddha, and each of them, tries to take refuge in another one, and it goes on, and basically they all are afraid. Now, what was interesting in this passage is that at some point, so the point is given in yellow on the screen, at Tutrul Ne, all the Kangyur versions break off in mid-sentence, and they omit basically half a page of text, which is then reinserted at a later point in the narrative, but it doesn't follow logically, so it breaks the narrative structure. And fortunately, the correct order is found in the versions of the Nyingma Gyaltsen. And so in the document here, I provided, the Tibetan as it's found in the Kangyo versions with a translation as if that were correct, which it is not. And then again, I provided the text as it's found in the Nyingma Gyaltsen versions with the full passage in the proper sequence. So I suppose my questions are at the end of the document. I mean, the first one has already been answered. It was about the preferred choices of technical vocabulary, and you mentioned that this is going to be available in a future update. But my second questions, and I'm sorry, my questions may be a bit naive because I'm fairly new to using this kind of AI-assisted translation technology. But anyway, my questions are, if we have, like in this case, multiple versions of a single passage, and of course with the Dege Kangyo, we have quality e-texts, which is a great thing. And for the, as you mentioned, for the Lhasa Kangyo also, we have good quality e-texts. The ASIP e-texts are very good. But now when it comes to the Nyingma Gyaltsen material, the e-texts are of very varying quality. So here we have for the Dege Nyingma Gyaltsen, we have an e-text which is somewhat okay. As far as the Tsamdrak e-text is concerned, it's a very poor quality. And I think for the Tinkye, as far as I know, there is no e-text available. So it would be a case of scanning, doing the OCR oneself. So the question is, when we don't have a reliable e-text, obviously that will affect the quality of the output of the AI translation, or else one has to type in the Tibetan or Sanskrit oneself, which itself may not be that time efficient. And then the other question which follows from that is more generally, if this doesn't risk, leading scholars somewhat astray, because of course there's a great sense of time efficiency with all of this. But e-texts, even good e-texts, are never perfect, and in a sense, one has to always look at the source document, whether it's a physical manuscript or a PDF or a photograph or whatever. And I'd worry a bit about the tendency that might come out, that everyone is going to be happily using e-texts and not looking at the actual texts themselves. And I did have actually another question which came up during the workshop, so I might just add that here if you don't mind.
Please.
So this is more about using Explore in the Dharmamitra functionality. And so is it possible, if we know that there's a Tibetan text that has existed at some point in Sanskrit, to find whether there are any Sanskrit or quotations of that text in Sanskrit, in some Sanskrit texts? Is it possible to find that? So, for example, to put the name of this text, Dasang Tigle, and then to see if there are any Sanskrit texts that quote from it, even though the text itself no longer exists in Sanskrit. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think these are very deep and important questions, and they really also tackle some of the core issues that we have with this new technology. I think first of all, I fully agree with you on the danger that reliance on e-text is creating. And this was certainly already the case when I was in my training 10 years ago, when I learned Sanskrit and Tibetan, that obviously e-texts were around at that time, but then all the problems that e-text collections have, and these are sometimes um, not even intentionally, but if we think, for example, on the graduate collection, there's the case that we have a couple of Sanskrit texts that are reconstructed from Tibetan or from Chinese. So the Sanskrit has, in that sense, never really existed, but it's the invention of scholars of recent years. And obviously, if you work with that material and you assume that this is a reliable source to quote, then you will go into a lot of trouble. So you cannot just uncritically use an e-text. I think you always have the duty of going back to the original edition and to understand what the edition is actually what the edition wants to say. And that is extremely important. And the same applies to the ASIP e-text, to the Isukia e-text as well. I think they are trying very much to be a helpful resource, and obviously they are. But if the user of the system like Dharmamitra stop at just looking at the e-text, that would be a big problem, I think. So in that sense, we want to make it comfortable to get quickly to the original block print. So this is why we added the links to ArcATS and to the TODA archive. So at least you previously it was difficult to get there. That was a limitation, but now you only have to click twice to get to the block prints, at least when it is a canonical work in the Kangyo and the Tengyo, then this is possible. For Nyingma material, as you have described, this is a bit of a more complex situation. And the good news here is that together with BDRC, we are currently working on a large effort to OCR and to re-OCR the block prints and the material digitized within the BDRC archive. And that also means that we will be able to, on the one hand, have higher quality e-text, so we have a better representation of that. And also it means we can provide more links to the original block prints and the photographs on BDRC, which I think is the most important part here, because the e-text is only, it's a stopgap solution, so to speak. It makes the search possible, and that's great because now we can search across all of this material. But yeah, I think if you look closely, you will discover some problems on each page, probably. I think that is a bit my experience with ASIP back then, was that some kind of problem can occur very, very quickly. So yeah, these are obviously problems and requires education, I think, for users to understand and for people in training to know about this. I think when it comes to variant readings and the fact that we might have 2 or 3 or 4 different versions of the same text preserved in different Kangyo versions and different paracanonical collections, I think this is a problem that moves out of the domain of a tool like Dharmamitra, and maybe for good reasons. I think, of course, on the one hand, there are machine-assisted translation tools, cut tools, and systems that try to really cover everything. And Dharmamitra is intentionally, we are not trying to do that. So we are trying to provide tools that you can use at specific points in your work. So for example, if you need to render your text from the block print into an e-text, then you can use our OCR system, and it will hopefully save some time to use that instead of typing it in manually. So that's a help, but it still requires the human to check the output and to post correct it and to make sure that everything is in place. And I'm very sure there will be problems in the OCR as well for the foreseeable future. So that is the one part. And I think also for the translation, if we think about the variant versions as you demonstrated, this requires conscious effort on deciding what we input into the translator, because only in a way, I think it's a bit like garbage in, and then we get also garbage out. So if our input has problems, if there are like philological problems that we couldn't solve on our end, then the translator will just try to make sense of that, and it might be really a bad result. Yeah, so a bad edition obviously leads to bad outcome, but I think this has been also the case before AI. Yeah, so obviously if a text is poorly edited, then how much sense does it make to even translate the text? Yeah, that's a question that can always be raised. And I think in a very similar way, that also applies to AI, that inputting material that is poorly edited doesn't really make a lot of sense, even though one good effect of AI in that regard can be that usually if you have larger problems in the text and you then enter it into Dharmamitra, you quickly see that it creates totally wrong renderings, and the names and everything can be totally off. So if the output of Dharmamitra really makes absolutely no sense, then of course you can first of all criticize the computer and maybe be angry at that, but it might also be a good moment to pause and to think about maybe there's some deeper problems in the text that need to be addressed. So that's also one thing that we observed with some users who reported that Dharmamitra can actually be really helpful to find difficult philological problems in the text, because then the translation really sometimes makes absolutely no sense. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to know that you're working on these on OCRing the Nyingma collections as well. That's really great to know.
Yeah, we are very excited, and hopefully we can, provide more variated collections on Dharmamitra as well in collaboration with BDRC on this. So yeah, extending the data coverage is really important, and that really also defines how useful the platform can be. Yeah.
Yes. And is the OCR tool that you showed that's available on your website, is it the same tool that BDRC had released a year ago that's now been improved, or is it a completely different one?
So this is a new tool that we are currently actively developing together with BDRC. So it's not yet, let's say, it's not yet at the stage where it's like perfectly polished. So you will see some problems at times. So for example, if you input a blank page, it might create some weird output, or it's, sometimes there are still those smaller problems, but we have compared it against other tools like Google Vision OCR or Gemini, and it's much better. It's maybe currently perhaps the only model that can really handle block prints and UME script to some extent. So yeah, it's currently the best solution, but it still has some problems, and we are working on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
And would you maybe mind just seeing whether it's possible to find such Sanskrit parallels for a Tibetan text?
Oh yeah, that question, that's also a good question. So on the one hand, if you have the Tibetan and you have like a passage that is a couple of sentences long, then you can use Explore to discover that. And the way to do that would be to select the target filter and Explore to Sanskrit, sorry. If you have a Tibetan passage, then you can set the target filter to Sanskrit, and then you can paste in the passage and search for that. On text level, that will be more difficult. So if you only have the text name and you want to find all cases where that might have been existing, that will be more difficult. So in that sense, our system can work with literal cases. So if there's really a literal rendering that is similar in our Sanskrit database, then we have a chance to find it. But if it's a more abstract question, I think it will not be very useful. There's also the problem is that in a lot of cases, citations and textual borrowings are obviously not marked. Yes, so the texts are not telling us where this is taken from and so on. So it's obviously in Indian literature, but also I think in Tibet, the same phenomenon has happened a lot, that people took over passages and pasted them, edited them, and made small emendations. And for that reason, it's really, really difficult to reconstruct this unless we have the textual source actually. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, is there any questions from someone to this topic? Yes, Andrew, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to ask why don't you have X, because I know there's usually a huge amount of work that has to go into making some feature available and like tons of text input and all kinds of training and things. But one thing this reminded me of, this last question, what it reminded me of was something I've been thinking about, is the ability to train a system to accept like Chinese and make its best guess at reconstructing the Sanskrit from that. And it seems like we have training material for that. I don't know if there's a sufficient amount, but I know that there are scholarly studies, or even in the source like Chinese, the translators themselves may have mentioned like how they derived this word from the Sanskrit. And I think that would be a really interesting feature to have. So I'm sure it's crossed your mind, or I'm sure someone's brought it up before. But
Yes.
is there any movement in that direction currently?
So we have used our algorithms to identify almost all passages where we have literal renderings of Sanskrit that is in e-text, so digitally available Sanskrit that is in e-text that has matching Chinese passages. So we have worked on this for a couple of years now, and a lot of that is in the Dharma Nexus database. So if you are looking for that, we have that. And now, obviously, all of this data enables us to do exactly what you were saying, to basically train a model that can go from Chinese into Sanskrit, for example. And I think the use case of that is an interesting one. It would be very experimental. And you might be able, actually, I think on our website, let me check how well it works, because I think in theory you can actually do that. Because
Oh,
we have
wow.
all of our parallel data in the system, so it's all inside. So let me give it a try. Let me check. I just need to find some Chinese. That's the first the first step would be to pick up some Chinese. I will pick something that is obviously not translated. So let me take the introduction of the Chang Wei Shalun. So that, to my knowledge, I mean, it has some echo in some Siddhamati work, but it's not really translated. So let me put the Chinese here and then set the target language to Sanskrit. And this should now make use of our data collection, to my knowledge. So it should use the parallel sentences that we have in our database and then do the reconstruction based on the reference material that we have. Whether this is a great rendering, I'm not sure, but it looks looks like Sanskrit. So yeah. So I mean,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking of, I mean, a whole text that's asking a lot, but like specific terminology, like
yeah.
if there's really confusion over, like there was a Jan Nadir wrote a paper about, or caused by a Western monk who translated one of the Chinese versions of the Dhammapada or Dharmapada, and there was this word that I think it was Zhiqian, a certain Chinese translator, he'd gotten very creative with the word bhikkhu or bhikshu and translated into hunger ender. And
interesting, yeah.
to someone whose background was in Pali, but who learned Chinese secondary and didn't know this really weird, quirky translation by this very specific translator, he was completely stumped. So I always think this was what I had in mind, like specific terms. The example I just gave of hunger ender, that would probably be very difficult for a system to figure out. But
yes,
yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of just specific terms.
Yes. I think one tool in that direction could be our lexicon app, which we are currently developing, and it's in the beta phase because we still have a bit of overgeneration of not so precise results. But I think that would be a way to look for renderings of Sanskrit, of Chinese terms and their matching Sanskrit. So that is one way I think you could use that, for example, because that will give precise locations of where a certain Sanskrit term is rendered in a certain way into Chinese, for example. So that is one way. Maybe I can demo the beta quickly, even though it's, I mean, it has some issues, but I think it is in its own way a useful resource. So we have this link here, which leads to the dictionary. And here I will now lead with an Sanskrit term, but you can, for example, for a term like Atma, you can then turn it to Chinese, and this will then give you passages where the term Atma is rendered into Chinese, for example. So this is one way to have this lookup based on the passages that we have identified. And you can obviously also do the other way around. You can lead with queries in Chinese. I will just use this term here. And then, you can find possible Sanskrit renderings for that. Like, for example, for Wordgen, you then see Atmadrishti. And here you can also apply the filter. So if you want to go for early Chinese material that is like pre-Kumara Jiva, for example, you could set the filter here accordingly to limit it to that. So I think that is hopefully helping, but it's of course only really functioning on text where we have the Sanskrit and where we have where the matching was successful. So that's not always the case. And I think especially for a lot of the early material, we might actually lack the Sanskrit source to do this.
Okay, great. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, does anyone have questions or comments? If not, then let's move on to the next presenter. Yadi Q, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this text I'm presenting is called Vyakta Bhavanugata Tattva Siddhi. It is originally written in Sanskrit and traditionally attributed to a female author called Yogini Chinta. And this text is widely attested in all major Tibetan canon and paracanonical canon, and their Gye number is 2222. One feature of this text is the author's fondness in using extremely long compound. For example, here, given on the screen is a parallel. This Sanskrit is one single sentence ended with the finite verb at the end, udvahati. Yeah. And maybe many question has been asked and has been answered nicely. Maybe the question in my mind is that usually when we perform a search, we enter a limited span of text or some keywords. In this case, what keywords I should put in, and is it possible? How would you think?
Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful example, Yadi. I think it's a great case of pushing Dharmamitra to its absolute limits, because this is a really, really interesting text. And I was looking at this, so let me share the Dharmamitra in this case. So here we go. So just going back to the translator. So I think there are challenges around this, obviously, and in a way, most database software and systems are very optimized to English language, and they expect words and clear separations and so on. And this is a wonderful example of how Sanskrit can defeat those things. yeah, we do have the grammatical rendering system. So I think one of the questions you were asking was about the compounds and whether it's possible to break them down. I think it does a somewhat okay job. So the first compound, it kind of gets the breakdown quite okay, but then it does a bit of things that I'm not really convinced of around the Atishaya, and then it does this Sa Raga. So here I think it's pushed to its limit. So I think it cannot really handle this long sentence structure. So it starts to yeah, do some illogical decisions here. Yeah, I think it's certainly challenging if you want to do the breakdown. It's usually, maybe it makes sense. I think you already have the semicolon in your text, that maybe it's a good idea to add a new line over there, and then it will guide the breakdown a bit, because the system is going line by line. So you can add line breaks in order to make it somewhat chunkable. Um, I'm actually, we can have a look at the Explore system, what it's able to do here. So if we go here and then we enter this, and we can set the language to Tibetan in this case. And yeah, it is a long piece of text, but I think it's still somewhat able to recover at least the Tibetan original of that. So that seems to work. So yeah, I think my best advice here would be to try. I think if it works with the full passage, then great. At least in this case, it seems to be able to identify the original source. Then it also finds something from Enigma text, which I don't know if it helps or not. That's a different question. But yeah, if it doesn't give any good results, then it's always a good idea to, yeah, delete parts of it and to try it with shorter queries and to see if that works. Yeah, I think some combinations of individual subcompounds might work. I was trying this filtering for Sanskrit, and I think I was not really very happy with the results, to be honest. I think it only finds a bit of Mahabharata, maybe, which seems rather unrelated. But that might also be a hint that our database doesn't really have material that is very relevant to this. Yeah, so yeah, it's yeah, finding something here, it might be helpful, but I think the overall results, yeah, Vishnu Purana, maybe there's something in there, but in general, it's limited. Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's not so much concrete advice I can give for this text. Certainly a long passage like this will push the system. So if you can reduce it to 2 or 3 lines, something to the length of this, then you will probably get more sensible results. So I think the ideal length for the Explore system is something like, I don't know, 100 to 200 characters in Sanskrit, maybe 500 is still okay. But if you have a long passage like this, yeah, it will maybe not find too much. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe also it has been asked by people that we are actually feeding edited text. And yes, this text is also post-editing, but in transmission, especially this one, because we have a long compound and almost every single word within the compound has so many variants. So yeah, but of course we cannot expect AI to do our job.
No.
But indeed, yeah, the data you are presenting is yeah, is really edited text.
Yeah. I mean, we currently, our database is also just really limited to things that are edited, so we don't have any manuscript data at the moment. I think it would be, I mean, one of my dreams, my personal dreams, would be to add the NGMPP data at some point. Yeah, and that would, of course, first of all, require to have a good OCR for the, or HTR in that sense, a handwritten text recognition for the manuscripts. But if we could do that, I think that would be really great. And in a way, it would be a different application. But for Tibetan, we are more or less at the point where we have a lot of block prints that are digitized where this is actually feasible to do an OCR and then to connect the OCR directly with Meter, which has its merits, I think, and would be great to do that for Sanskrit at some point, I think. And then it can be an addition to the edited text can be to also access the manuscript. And maybe there can be a future where, yeah, platforms like this can give people access directly to the manuscript pictures. I think that would be really, really great. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have questions or comments? Please, if anything comes to mind, don't hesitate to raise your hand. Okay, then let's move on to the next material. John Newman, are you with us?
Yes.
Hi,
Okay,
please. Yes?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I need 1 second to share your material. I think I just got it. So, okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, it's on the screen, yeah. Yeah, please.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on this. It's a fascinating presentation that you've done already. And I'd just like to start by saying I began using Dharmamitra when you first released it publicly. I don't know when that was, about a year or so ago. And the first time I used it, it completely, to use an Americanism, blew my mind because I was able to track down multiple references to a piece of Sanskrit that I was not aware of. So before we get into my thing specifically, I had a minor technical question. It seemed like you mentioned that there were extensions for Chrome and Firefox. Are there extensions for Safari also?
Oh, that's a good question. No, we don't have a Safari extension yet, but I think it would be good to have that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked is because it seemed like some of the functionality that I was attempting to use it for wasn't working, and I suspect that it's because of my browser rather than Dharmamitra itself. So anyway, I'll try using it within Chrome or Firefox and see if it functions a little bit better. So my question really has to do with issues of translation primarily, I think. And I don't really expect AI to solve this. And I think you mentioned earlier that LLMs basically give you a kind of boiled down version of whatever has gone into them. So they're essentially feeding off existing text in one way or another, whether in Sanskrit, Tibetan, whatever, and then English as well. So I've always been puzzled by the translation of the term swalakshana as it's used in Chandrakirti's works. And in particular, there's a term Rangitsiniki in Tibetan, which represents in this particular text that I selected, Chandrakirti's Chatushataka Tika. The underlying Sanskrit lemma is asiddhaswalakshana. And then the Tibetan translation for that is Rangitsiniki Madrupa. So the problem is that swalakshana has multiple meanings, as is well known. There's sort of a basic sense of it in terms of being a essential characteristic of a thing, which is defines the thing as such. And then in Dignaga Dharmakirti's system, of course, swalakshana takes on a somewhat different character, meaning perhaps a unique particular, especially the causally efficient particulars that are the objects of perception. So then in Chandrakirti, it seems that there's a shift in a slightly different direction, perhaps, in which swalakshana, especially in this compound asiddha swalakshana, takes on a different characteristic such that it's referring to a kind of ontological feature of a thing. And within Chandrakirti, this is used in apposition in one passage for with Rangingmo and Rangjin. So my question basically for your workshop is, how can an AI translate this specific usage when there's no real established English term to correspond to it? The Japanese scholar Yoshimitsu Chizuko, if I hope I pronounced her name correctly, has done a series of studies on this term, especially in Tsongkhapa's works having to do with Rangitsuniki Drupa. And she ended up translating or rendering it. Her choice was being established as intrinsically real existence or object, all of that strung out. But translating swalakshana as intrinsically real seems to be quite a distance from its usage in, say, abhidharma or pramana sort of applications. So my basic question is, how can AI facilitate coming up with some kind of accurate English rendering of this when the people, and that applies to other European or other languages as well, when so far scholars who have studied this issue haven't been able to come up with their own, with any kind of commonly accepted rendering of it. In one of Yoshimitsu's notes, she reviews the about 100 years of scholars, particularly into English, attempting to render swalakshana in this particular context of Rangitsuniki Drupa, Rangitsuniki Madrupa. So yeah, that's my basic question is, what can Dharmamitra do if we ourselves as scholars haven't been able to establish a specific understanding of what this term refers to?
Yeah, I think that is maybe the biggest limitation of AI. And I think more generally speaking, tools in general. Yeah. So in a way, the AI is, even though it's quite good at pretending that it's not just a tool, it is by the end of the day just a tool. Yeah. So in a way, a dictionary can only help you if it has an entry that is actually for the term that you are looking up. And I think in a very similar way, AI is great at representing one form of the consensus of how humans understand a text. I think this is like let's say, the biggest expectation or the biggest hope that I have for AI technology, like the one we use in Dharmamitra, is that it can be a convenient and yeah, somewhat trustworthy representation of how humans agree on what a good translation of the terms, or let's say a probable translation, a statistically plausible translation of the terms could be. And it obviously exactly falls apart at those terms where we as humans struggle to come to an agreement as well. So that is technically just the limitation. And I think, I mean, we can argue about this, and it goes a bit into almost philosophical directions, whether AI, by the way it's designed, will ever be able to come up with genuinely new renderings and new ideas that humans didn't have before. So I think some people will argue in that direction. I'm myself a bit conservative on that end, and I wouldn't expect that to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's useless, not at all. I think being able to access the existing renderings reliably, that would already be a great achievement. So in that regard, yeah, I think for terms like this, it also taps a bit the problem that we discussed earlier today, where we have For example, the Neoctian Sanskrit and the Shleshas as well, where single term, single or like the same phrase when looked at it from different angles, and maybe even the intention of the author was to have it represent multiple meanings that can be read in different ways. And I think some authors were probably very good at playing those kind of games. And that really pushes what we can do with the technology to its limits at the moment. And yeah, but maybe there can be a future where we can add more secondary literature. And I think in a case like the one you presented today, being able to reflect the scholarly discussion behind that. So instead of just giving one rendering and saying, okay, Svalakshana here is this rendering, I think being able to say, okay, this is actually something that has been discussed in the following articles would be a great extension of Dharmamitra. And I hope that we can move things in that direction in the future. It is really more difficult to do properly than, I mean, the idea is nice, but then to make it properly work in a way that it really helps researchers and translators is more difficult. But yeah, I think my biggest hope for a platform like this would be to really make the current consensus of scholarship, of translators, of people who work with the material intensely, accessible in a convenient way. Yeah. So yeah, my hopes for it to make smart, genuine renderings, maybe not that huge. Yeah, but it might happen. I mean, that can certainly be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that someone was proposing to translate Tsongkhapa Sumbum using AI. I don't know what app or whatever program they were planning on using, but and then just having human beings kind of check up on it afterwards. But to me, like this Rangitsiniki Drupa, Rangitsiniki Matrupa, this kind of illustrates the problem with doing that because on the one hand, the Tibetans created an artificial language when they were uh, learning to translate works from Chinese and Sanskrit. But we can't really do that with English, I don't think, or at least the results would not be very intelligible to educated people. So I'm very curious as to whether AI has gotten to the point where it's able to produce translations that are at all reliable. And when you're dealing with philosophical or poetic sort of material, with straightforward narrative, maybe it's good enough to get us a good first draft to work with. But when you're dealing with philosophical texts, and I mean, with Chandrakirti, the longer I look at him, the less I understand because it seems like he's using language in such a sophisticated and nuanced way that without really knowing the entire body of his work and the philosophical ideas underlying it, then you can come up with all kinds of radically divergent, even contradictory interpretations of a particular passage.
Yeah, I very much agree, and I'm myself more on the side of let's take it slow with the technology and have the human at every step to really make the right calls, because I think, especially, I think the material you are talking about is a very good example of that. But I would also think if we take a text like the Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, for example, which I think maybe has been rendered multiple times into English now, not really directly from the Sanskrit, which is a pity, but I think there may be like specific studies who do that for certain sections. But this text, I think, is still not translated well into English. Yeah, so the renderings we have are probably struggling to get the point in a lot of cases. And this is for things where people have put in considerable amount of time to understand it. So, yeah, I think in that sense, I'm very skeptical of saying, okay, we can push the button and then we get the entire English rendering or something out. I mean, technically it's possible, of course. You can translate the entire Kangyo this evening and we could have a version of that tomorrow. I'm not sure what this would help. And in that sense, that's also why we don't provide, let's say, the English Kanji on dharmamitra.org. Yeah, that's not our goal. And in a way, the interface always requires you to make the effort yourself to put something in and to click the button. And then you can also see if the result is helping you or not. So yeah, but I think obviously very, very difficult problems cannot be shortcut with AI at all, I think. And the philological problems we have, the translation problems we have, they just compound. And if we then put an AI layer on top, then basically the English removes us further from understanding it than to really get to where we need to be. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for this. I think it's a very good reminder of being aware of how difficult the task is actually that we are dealing with. So AI makes it look very easy to come to a first English understanding, and it's in a lot of cases super helpful, at least for me. I'm reading Tibetan very, very slowly, so when I can use a tool like Mitra, then of course I get to some rough idea of what the passage is about. But then once we start to drill into specific terms, then it basically can fall apart very, very quickly. And then we are really back to understanding ourselves, which can be very, 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 very demanding.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. And again, I think this machine is fantastic. It's wonderful. I use it virtually every day. But when you have to drill down into specific senses of specific terminology, then it's just coming up against the limitations of our understanding of these terms and these ideas that Buddhists produced over the course of 2000 whatever 100 years.
Mm. Yeah, and I think Kurt made this wonderful simile in the beginning of Dharmamitra when we were in the first year of the project, where he said, okay, maybe we shouldn't call it a translator, but just a dictionary plus plus. And I think that's a good way to think about it, because it's in a way, it's an extension of a chain of tools that has been developing for people working on Buddhist text over generations. Yeah, so there were times where only physical dictionaries were available. Then they have been digitized at some point, and the digitized versions became searchable, and then the searchable versions became accumulated, and then suddenly you have the machine translation system, which is basically another evolution of that. So I think that's a good way to think about this technology, not to, because you don't expect the dictionary to do the thinking part for you. Yeah, so that's like the expectation wouldn't be made, but since these AI tools are so fluent and so quick, they kind of give the impression that they can also do the actual thinking part, which I think is the dangerous conclusion. Yeah.
Final note from my side anyway, I put a little thing on my academia.edu page about how Claude hallucinated some Sanskrit for me. And I was looking for a passage I was working from a Tibetan translation, and I was looking for Sanskrit underlying it. And Claude produced this Sanskrit that it said was specific citations from specific texts. And it asserted this with complete confidence. But then when I looked for them, I found out, oh no, actually, those passages don't exist in those texts. And when I challenged Claude on this, it admitted to having essentially fabricated these passages of Sanskrit out of nothing. And that really was an eye-opener for me personally. I wasn't familiar with the hallucinatory aspect of AI up to that point. So I guess we're still going to need human beings to do a few things for the foreseeable future.
Yes, absolutely. And on Dharmamitra, we are employing some technological checks that the system will only output things that is actually verified in our database. It is rarely happening, and that means it's not completely unseen, that it might output a reference that doesn't exist. This happened once recently because our database was not accessible for a while, so there was like a bug in the code. the system couldn't fetch the reference, so it was reproducing a reference that didn't exist, and that is of course not great. Under normal certain circumstances, this should not happen. So we really try to provide the link for everything. Yeah, but I think these machines are crazy in a way, because I had the same experience at some point, and then once you spot it and you are like, because I use AI a lot for programming. Obviously, it's great for programming because it saves so much time. But then sometimes I'm wondering, because the system is done with the work very, very quickly and the output makes no sense. So I'm asking, well, did you actually build this database? And it says, no, I didn't. But you now, as you say it, I should have done that. And it's like, in a way, it's very similar to, can you give me the Sanskrit reference? But then it just like totally makes it up. And when you call it out, then it's like, oh yes, I'm sorry, I totally made it up. But this is like
Exactly.
no human would even think about acting that way. It's totally
Yeah.
out of mind. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you very much, and
Thank
also your
you.
feedback has been great for us. It's always great to get yeah, to hear about how we can improve the system. So also thank you for that. Yeah.
So does anyone have questions or comments to the terminological or philosophical parts? Yes, Patrick Lambelet, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just a comment kind of about some of the issues that John raised here. And I think that, I mean, there's a tendency for those of us who, you know, if we're teaching to undergraduates, especially now, and people who are just, who are very, you know, who are dealing with AI and kind of assuming that this is going to be, that the answers that they're getting from AI, and I'm not just talking about with Dharmamitra, I think that here we're dealing with, you know, I think most of us who are using it at this level are people who are already quite trained in languages, and we go into it with a pretty good understanding of what the risks are, and we can spot the mistakes. And I think that this is the big challenge if you're involved in education, is making that clear to people who are just sort of jumping in and like, oh, okay, I put this into this search engine or into this, you know, into an AI tool, and assuming that the answer that it gives us is correct and accurate. And I think that this is, I mean, I don't really have any, this is not really a question, but just sort of, you know, an additional perspective on the challenges that we have in educating people to be really careful, right? That this is just a tool, that these are extremely sophisticated research tools, but they are not, you know, we can't just assume that they are the be all and end all. And I think that's a huge challenge for all of us who are kind of in education right now.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. I mean, this is sort of back when I was teaching undergraduates, I'd get term papers with chunks of Wikipedia stuck into them. And I mean, this dates me obviously, but now, and then the fabricated online available term papers came in available. But now I can't imagine what it's like trying to get undergraduates to read books. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Divya Kumar Dumas, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. This was actually, I really, really enjoyed this presentation. I heard about this at the Schoenberg Rare Books conference a little while ago at Penn. And I have various thoughts and comments, but I wanted to sort of continue on this little AI issue that we're talking about in terms of teaching, because it strikes me that it's actually also an opportunity. Because, you know, when we teach critically to students who believe that what they're getting is in fact the truth, then in some way they're more able to believe that what they get is the truth. And there's this kind of opportunity here to teach students in a way where they have to realize that what is out there may not be the truth, but is always an interpretation. And I think that there's something very I don't know, positive about this context that you're creating here, where what you said about the dictionary thing, for example, where we have to define our terms right at the beginning, which is that no, none of us are purveyors of the truth. We are all purveying interpretation. And so I think this is actually potentially a really excellent movement in the humanities. So I wanted to put that out there because I know it's very scary, you know, and students are doing absurd things. But thinking about Wikipedia, for example, nowadays, if you think about like Wikipedia education, sometimes it's an opportunity to learn things that you wouldn't otherwise have access to had you not. You know, it depends. It depends on the site. I work on sites. I'm an archaeologist, but you know, it depends. But it is there also, that opportunity. So I wonder if anyone really, I wonder if Sebastian, if you would be willing to respond to sort of that perspective.
Yeah, I think first of all, coming at this from the side of somebody who's building the tools and who's not really, I mean, I'm not an educator at the moment, so I have not a good idea of what is going on in the classrooms, but I can say that when building a tool like Dharmamitra, what is constantly on my mind is how can we make sure that all the search results that should be there are actually there, for example. So this is what drives me, is like make sure that the answers that we are providing are something that an experienced scholar, an experienced translator or researcher would expect to see. And now let's assume we do a good job of that. So we have 90% coverage or however we think about that. So we are doing something where like a lot of scholars will say, okay, good job, well done. Hypothetically speaking, what then happens is that the new generation who comes into the world of research, who has this tool then available, will come to a conclusion that was never intended. And that is to say, the results that I'm getting is all that there is. And there's nothing beyond that. And I think this is for somebody who's growing up without the tools would be a something like a counterintuitive conclusion. Yeah, we can say if somebody who didn't grow up with the tool, but who is used to go to the library themselves, who's used to search in databases themselves, they know BDRC, they know Gretel, they have all of these tools, they mastered them manually, so to speak. And then they see, okay, Dharmamitra gives me 90% of those results and I only need to press one button. Great, my life is much easier now. But they are aware that the 10% are missing, while the new generation that is coming into the world needs to learn that awareness in a very contrarian setting, I think, because they have basically only those tools in front of them. And I think in a way, and I hope I'm getting the path back to your argument, because I think it's a bit similar to how we had this brief period. I think one can look at it in a way like people in the, let's say, pre-photograph area were used to looking at paintings, and paintings are always an interpretation. They always have an intention. You can see it. It's obviously a representation of the world that is not real in quotation marks because there's somebody who commissions the painting and so on. So there's always some distortion already happening. So people in that age were used to interpret what they are looking at. Then the photograph came and you had the, in quotation marks, realistic representation of the outer world, which was a period of, I don't know, 150 or 200 years. And then we have the AI technology, which can produce a realistic photograph that is totally convincing, but totally fake. Yeah, so this is now what we have. So basically, again, we are moving away from the reality in that sense, and we are always confronted with interpretations. And I think that is also what is happening for philology in that sense. And maybe the whole idea that we can create the one ur-text of the Sanskrit text or of the Tibetan text that has been driving Buddhist studies since, I don't know, Bonhoeffer started the thing in 1840 something. This might also be a period where we look back at some point and say, well, that was a bit naive, maybe. So I don't know. Maybe that's a way to look at it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, that's just what comes to my mind. Yeah.
Okay, Marcus Perman, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you all so much. And thank you to Sebastian and Sarah for organizing this. And it's impressive. It's impressive also how magnanimous you all are in responding to all these questions. Well done. Well done. I just wanted to jump in and clarify, just to stamp out any false news. Someone mentioned that Tsongkhapa's collected works will be translated using AI, and the implication was that that would be a kind of press the button and get it all done. Fear not, that project is being led by Thupten Jinpa and Donald Lopez personally. They will be reading all of that personally, every word from the Tibetan, and each volume will be assigned to professional scholars and translators, and teams of people will be working on it. AI will be used to speed up some of the processes, and they'll be experimenting with it in order to figure out how to do this 26 or 28 volumes, whatever it is, in a more reasonable time period, but they will not be using it naively. So fear not. I think it's going to be an amazing project. And I think we can trust Jimpa and Donald Lopez. If you know about them or how they work, don't worry, Tupin Jinpa won't let anything be published until he has verified what he thinks it means anyway. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Glad to hear it. In fact, that was just a rumor that I got from a friend, and I had no source for it. So I don't want to be a purveyor of fake news. If someone is able to translate that entire collected works accurately, wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions or thoughts? Then maybe we can move on to our last presenter. Philippe Mas, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Wonderful.
Great.
Great.
Then
Okay,
please.
yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Sarah, thank you very much. Sebastian, I'm happy to share a little bit of my research, which deals with the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. It's not a Buddhist text, but coming from a Brahmanical perspective, but very much influenced by Buddhism. And before I go into it, I would like to say that I'm, like John, actually mind blown by what you are doing. It's absolutely amazing. That's the only word that I can find. And I'm especially impressed by the speed of the improvement of your tools. So things that annoyed me a couple of weeks ago are not there anymore. So it's moving forward very fast. And I think that even you are quite conservative with the perspective that you provide, that you can even, I think that you probably exceed what you announce here publicly. So you can be optimistic. And I'm telling you this because I'm presenting here a difficult case from my philological work on a text which is not actually well established in its printed versions that we find. You said earlier that it's important for scholars to go back from e-text to the printed edition to actually check the source. But I think especially for Sanskrit, it's important to see that a similar transformation has happened earlier, namely the movement away from manuscripts to printed editions. The printed editions have actually made manuscript studies more or less obsolete, and scholars usually believe that what they have in front of them in printed editions is the text as it was created, sometimes hundreds or thousands years earlier, and we usually forget about the history of the transmission and the circumstances in which these printed editions were produced, because they were produced by people who wanted to achieve results quickly at the beginning of the 20th century, to make a lot of material available on the basis of accessible manuscripts, mostly written on paper manuscripts in Devanagari script. Nobody actually had the possibility to go to various libraries to manuscript libraries to compare different text versions. So all this is work that still needs to be done. So yeah, the case that I wanted to present here is about the working of karma, theory of karma and rebirth, and the role of vasanas, of latent impressions, the relationship between memories and samskaras, also impressions. And the text that I'm working on is quite obscure in this particular passage. For example, it does not actually have or specify what the sutra is talking about when we have this genitive plural jati desha kala vyavahitanam api. So what are the things that are separated by birth, by location, and by time? And in my translation, I wanted to leave this open. Dharmamitra, on the other hand, then supplies a subject, and namely the latent impressions that we find here in the translation. There is an uninterrupted sequence of latent impressions. So, yeah, so anantaryam is the uninterrupted sequence, and the genitive is jati desha kala vyavahitanam, vyavahita adjective or verbal participle without a specific referent. So this is open to interpretation, and Dharmamitra is narrowing this down by supplying a subject which is not actually there, which I find a little bit problematic. Then, yeah, there are other problems. First of all, I believe that the text as it is appears in the printed edition with Svyavanjaka Anjana at the position where there is this star here doesn't make much sense. Yeah, Svyavanjaka Anjana is the manifestation caused by its manifesting cause. And here we have a construction, so it in the sentence that if the manifesting cause would arise, then something would manifest vyajeta. And I think that this vyajeta takes up the anjana here in this definition of what the arising of a certain maturation as a cat actually is. So, but when I feed this into Dharmamitra, without this emendation, Dharmamitra nevertheless comes up with a translation. And this is something which I would wish Dharmamitra to have, to indicate when Dharmamitra has problems.
Yeah.
It says, okay, so that actually is syntactically difficult, or it's difficult from the perspective of meaning. I don't know actually what to do with it. And similar in the later part of the sentence where we have a absolutive here and a finite verb, an absolutive without an accusative object, upadaya vyajyeta. And Dharmamitra takes vasana here to be the subject of this sentence. So actually, from the perspective of Sandhi, that's not possible. Vasana needs to be nominative or accusative plural feminine in order not to enter into vowel Sandhi. Otherwise, we would have vasano upadaya if vasana would be the subject of the sentence, and then we wouldn't have an accusative object for the absolutive. And yeah, so and if vasana is plural, then it cannot be the subject to the final verb vyajyeta, which is occurs in the singular. So there are numerous problems that I have here. And what I actually would like to be able to is to enter into a dialogue with Dharmamitra. To give Dharmamitra a live feedback saying, look, thank you very much. It's very useful. And I think Dharmamitra is always very useful, even if the result is not immediately usable. it's another version, like another printed translation by a predecessor, which also frequently do not make much sense. So that helps me to reflect to develop my own thoughts about this. But yeah, telling Dharmamitra, look, why do you take this to be the subject? Why don't we have a accusative object here? And why do you supply here a subject for this sutra where there is none? Wouldn't it be better to leave the sutra as vague as it is to open up more interpretations? So these are the kinds of problems that I was facing, and yeah, you have answered this already earlier. Some of this, and I see this, but still, yeah, I think the one thing that I would really want to be able to is this exchange with Dharmamitra, live exchange.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think, in a way, I also think it's very sobering to see the mistakes that Mitra makes. I think that's also important to be aware of that. I think at the same time, it's also, I think you made the point as well that a lot of the human created translations are not very good either. And that also extends to the critical editions, of course. If somebody is not able to edit the text properly, then usually the translation is also not usable. That happens often. Yeah, I think there's a technical reason, and maybe it's a bit of our approach so far why we don't have the dialogue capability yet. So the example that John gave previously, where he was asking Claude for some Sanskrit reference, and then it totally made it up, and then only after calling it out, it was like pedaling it back and then saying, "Okay, I totally made this up." So our approach to avoiding that Dharmamitra does something like that so far is that we really limit what you can do with the interface. So we don't have the open dialogue capability the way that Claude and other systems have it, because I was very scared of people starting to use Dharmamitra for asking all kinds of questions. And then obviously what we can verify with our database and what we can reference in e-text and so on to make sure that that is always lined up with what people would throw at a system like that is really challenging. But then I think we are making improvements with the technology, and one upgrade that we are working on will be user accounts, which then make it possible to have like individual translation histories where you can have certain strands that you have been working on. And in that context, we also want to add a dialogue capability that you can make suggestions, because I think it would be one of the best ways to get feedback back to Dharmamitra, that we can also use that data in order to improve the system, which I think would be really important. So that's a direction we want to take, but how we can make it really work out technologically that we avoid hallucination is a bit challenging. Yeah, but I can see how valuable it would be, and it's also would be a great way to make Dharmamitra adapt more to your specific style and your specific way you would like to work with the text, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks again for the great work we're doing. That was definitely not meant as a fundamental critique. No? It's just wanted to highlight some limitations that I saw. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think yeah, and also we are occasionally updating the translation data and so on. So you will also see that the quality of translation is changing over time. So that's in general too, I think, especially for Dharmamitra, if we compare to the version that we had, I don't know, 2 years ago when we launched, the Sanskrit was still very rough, and I don't know if it was, I mean, compared to what we can do nowadays, I think it was barely usable at all. And in that way, I think also nowadays to 1 year ago, it has also changed. Yeah, so
absolutely. And many times I tried Dharmamitra on the Patanjali Yoga Shastra. The results of Dharmamitra were much better than what I find in a translation of earlier scholars. So
great.
congratulations on this. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, thank you everyone who submitted and presented the case studies. I think each one was fascinating in its own way. And I think we still have a little time, so if there is anyone who happens to have a specific example or case they would like to discuss, please speak up and we will make some time to take a look at it together. Okay, we have someone, Sarah Taub. Please, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, it's just a simple question, and I'm sorry if you already answered it, but does Dharmamitra give alternate possible grammatical analyses? And, it might be interesting if it does, it could perhaps weight them with how likely it finds them.
Just so I got the question right, you were asking about grammatical analysis.
Right,
Yeah.
like, oh, this could be, this could be the subject, that could be the object, but it could be a different way.
I think currently Dharmamitra is organized to go for one most plausible solution. And yeah, I think it came up a few times before today that this is not always ideal, and especially for Sanskrit, but also for Tibetan verses, for example, there are so many ways how it can be interpreted. Yeah, I think it would be a different design decision to allow for that. I do think we have to go that direction at some point in order to really cover and to be really um, appropriate for the material that people want to use Dharmamitra for. We should be able to do that at some point. But currently, yeah, I think it would be way down the line to do that, maybe in a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just like there's some easy earlier phase where it's considering different ones and could, bring that forth easily. It's not designed that way. Okay, thank you so very much. This is just absolutely amazing, just like everyone else here has said. Very, very appreciative.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question from Andrew, please.
Yeah, I just put a screenshot in the chat, and this is just a minor thing. I've been using Dharmamitra almost recently, almost exclusively to basically help learn Buddhist hybrid Chinese. So I'm building up vocabulary, flashcards and stuff. So I'm going through a certain text and doing quite a bit of searching just on terms. I'm not trying to translate texts. And this particular Chinese term popped up, and when I searched for it by itself, it gave an error. But when it occurs as part of I think it's usually a 4-character compound, then Dharmamitra could find it and translate it, and it was aware of it. But for some reason, by itself, it didn't recognize it. And the other 2 characters in that 4-character compound, it was able to identify by just the 2 characters. So I don't know why, and it's maybe not super important, but there was a little bug or error with this particular term.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting this. I think there are probably 2 reasons for this. So the one part is that for Chinese, the number of characters, I mean, the possibilities increase exponentially with the shorter the request becomes, and this is I think very intuitive, but for Chinese is especially extreme. The difference between 4 characters and 2 characters is basically you can have so many possibilities on 2 characters that the search system very quickly becomes overloaded with that. So this is a real problem. So this is, I think, one part that it just becomes a bit unreliable if you go for single or 2-character queries. The more substantial content you can give it, the more it can actually do something reasonable with that. So that is the one part. And the other part, and this might be at play here, is that we do try to nudge Dharmamitra a bit to stay on the topic of classical language, and ideally, I mean, Buddhism is not necessarily a gate, I think, because obviously we have a lot of Sanskrit literature that is not Buddhism, the same for Chinese, for Tibetan as well. That should be possible to work in Dharmamitra. So maybe we have to fine-tune this a little bit so that we don't gate too much. And I think in the case that you showed the screenshot, this request should not be gated. So let's see that we improve this, yeah.
Okay, anyone else? This is still a good opportunity to raise any questions or comments that haven't come up yet, but you might be thinking about. Jigme, please go ahead.
Thank you for this presentation. It's really interesting. I'm wondering if Philip Mass ran the text through the translate function on Dharmamitra, because I think he ran it through the research function, which wouldn't have given him an actual translation. Am I wrong in that, or am I missing something?
I used the research function of Dharmamitra for this translation that I showed. Yeah.
But if it wasn't put through the translate function, then the program wouldn't have had a chance to translate, right?
The Dharmamitra research function also provides a translation. So that is given at the beginning of the response. So when people use the research function, they will get a translation as well, yeah.
And it's an actual original translation for that particular piece, not something it's pulling from the database.
Exactly. So there's a bit of a technical difference. So when you use the normal translation function, then it's basically just trying to do a good job on that passage. So it will try its best to make a faithful rendering of that passage into English. But if you use the research function, then it will first assemble all the possible references from the database and only then start to translate. So this is why it's slower. So if you use the research function, you don't get the translation immediately. You have to wait a couple of seconds because it will start to crawl to the database. But I think on average, the quality of the translation will be a bit higher because it has all those contextual knowledge that it doesn't have in the normal translation mode. So usually it will lead to better outcomes. And this is maybe why Philip has decided to use that. I'm not sure, but
it might be interesting to put the passage through the just translate function to see what the difference would be. Anyway, thank you so much.
I think you're making a good point, and this is something that a couple of our users, I think Jacob Dalton made the point at some point that he really enjoys the fact that the different functions provide different translations, because it can sometimes really be nice when struggling with a passage, when working through something, that you have the normal translation mode and the deep research mode, and you can look at the output side by side, and that can maybe also help to understand better what is going on. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think if there is nothing else, Sebastian, maybe could you please share a few closing thoughts with us?
Thank you all very much for coming to this workshop, and I think it's very humbling and amazing to see so many people showing up. I didn't expect that, to be very honest, and it's also really showing that our work is being actually of practical value. And I think there are lots of digital humanities projects which don't really have the same amount, or which don't really see adaptation ever. And in that sense, I'm just so happy about seeing that people find this actually useful and that they can make something productive out of this. So yeah, this is great. And the feedback we are getting on days like today, it's just fantastic, because that really makes it possible for us to improve the system. And we try our best to listen and to see that we can make one step at a time to turn this platform into something that is more useful. Yeah. So yeah, thank you all very much for coming and for giving us all the great feedback. Yeah. Yeah, I think we will probably do this again. So we have already discussed this, that there will be a workshop in 2027. So maybe in the beginning of the year, in the spring period, the date we have to see, but I think we will do another follow-up of this, and it might become a yearly thing to have this opportunity to discuss together about the platform. Yeah. And you can, of course, always send us an email. There was unfortunately a small typo in the announcement of the workshop. So the email address was given with dharmamitra-project, but it's actually dharmamitra.project@gmail.com. So sorry for this. Yeah, but you can always send us an email if you have questions, if there are problems with the system. Please let us know, and we will take that into account. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Sebastian, could you share with us how the records will be available for the participants?
Oh yeah, this is also good. So we have recorded the session today, and of course, if anybody who is on the call who has been speaking, if you feel uncomfortable with the recording being online, then please reach out to us. We can cut the recording and make sure that only the things, only the people who want to be part of the recording are also accessible. Yeah, it will certainly be available on the Tzada Foundation YouTube channel, I think, and we will also make it available on the Dharmamitra YouTube channel. So yeah, it will be available in the coming weeks at some point. Yeah. Yeah, this is also a good point in the chat. I think Eventbrite hasn't been the greatest platform. We have also understood this, and I think next time we will try to do this in a more simple way by just providing a Google form that you don't need to sign up for. So sorry for this, but we will change the login format the next time. Yeah. Okay. I don't know, Markus, do you have something at the
No,
end?
thank you so much. It's
Okay.
wonderful, really amazing work. Thank you all so much. It's really exciting, and I
Yeah.
look forward to seeing all the continued developments.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think maybe we will probably send an email out over the Tzada mailing list when the recordings are online, I think. Yeah.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we will also put it on Facebook once it's online, so you can share it with anybody who's interested. Yeah.
Hey,
Perfect.
Sebastian?
Oh, yeah.
Sebastian?
Yeah, we hear you, Kurt. Yeah.
Could I just say a couple words?
Please.
Catching the very end here, but I just
You are
hope everyone realizes what an extraordinary effort this has been, pretty much single-handedly through Sebastian, with just a little bit of help from others. It shows an extraordinary amount of command of languages, computing skills, data, and also a good intuition about user interface. So I'm honestly amazed.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I mean, yeah, you have been the person who made all of this possible anyway. So
I'm the person helped you who make all this possible. Let's be clear about that.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, then yeah, thank you everybody, and I think it's been a great session, and thank you for all who contributed, and I think we can call it a day at this point. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian, and thank you for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.